Exactly 2 p.m. Very much welcome on behalf of the European Liberal Forum to the newest edition of Liberties and Lockdown. Thank you so much for welcoming us today into your living rooms, your studies, or maybe even today back again in your offices to discuss with us and maybe also to learn a little bit about the title of today, Back to the Future, Work and COVID-19. I'm Daniel Kadik, I'm the Executive Director of the European Liberal Forum, the political think tank and foundation of the ALDE Party. It is the 9th edition of our Liberties and Lockdown, a series that we came up with in the wake of the COVID-19 crisis to discuss what this crisis, what the measures against this crisis mean for us, but especially mean for our liberties in societies. Today, we'll talk about work, how COVID-19 has affected the workspace, but also what lessons are learned out of that and how COVID-19 and the crisis that followed will shape the future of work. Will the economies be more resilient after that to external and internal crises and threats? Will the measures against COVID-19 stick around? Will that change also how the way we work? Meaning, will we have more home office? Will there be a higher acceptance of that? But also, what will these new technologies that were, let's say, forced upon us in this crisis bring? These are just a couple of the things that we want to talk about today. For this, we have a fantastic moderator, Matthias Wouters. He is a researcher at the Institute for Labor Law at the University of Leuven. Thank you very much, Matthias, for being with us. And we have 3 fantastic panelists, amongst others, Martina Dlabayova, who is the first vice president of our board of directors. We have Esther Lynch with us, the deputy secretary general of the European Trade Union Confederation. And last but not least, we have Sandra Party, a good friend of ours and head of the Brussels office of the German Economic Institute. Before we start, I would like to give 2 technical remarks. Number 1, as you can see, this here is recorded, and you will be able to see this also live on Facebook and also see recording of this on Facebook, and you will be able to ask questions in writing to our panelists, and how that works, Matthias will tell you in a bit. So once more again, thank you very much, Matthias. Thank you very much to the speakers, and to all of you who are watching this. Thank you very much for tuning in today.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you very much all the participants as well as the organizers of this event. Now, Daniel already told you a little bit about the practicalities. I would like to stress that the Q&A, we really encourage you to use it, amongst other things, because I think it's one of the most interesting things for us as well, to hear different voices from across the European Union. I assume we have a bit of a diverse crowd, so that should help us to pick up on topics that are very lively, at least at the national level, and maybe we can share a bit of our insights from our own experience. Then if you would click down below on the Q&A, you will see that you have the ability to not only pose your own questions, but you can also upvote the questions of other participants. So in this case, you are sure that these questions will be picked up by me and be posed to the, well, whatever speaker you would like, or you could also just ask a question which in general be used to fuel the debate. Even another possibility is to indicate in your own question that you would also like to get the floor to explain your question a little bit, not too extensive, but at least to frame it a little bit so you can pose it in a way that makes more sense. Some questions are just too complex to put down in a couple of simple, manner. And this is a little bit everything I have to say about the Q&A. Then in terms of the topic, I think it is it's a very timely moment to discuss it, because in general, we do not provide enough, there's not enough sense of urgency in my view with regard to certain topics that we will discuss today. One way to kind of briefly give a flavor of what we will discuss is by discussing four different categories of workers in my view. You have the lucky workers, amongst others myself, who get to work from afar and who have maintained their level of income. These are, I think, the most lucky ones so far. But at the same time, you have to also stress that even in these cases, for instance, parents who have to combine telework with their parental duties, even these kinds of combinations have been problematic, and we've seen steps in Belgium, for instance. Then you also have the fortunate workers who have only made a couple of adjustments. For instance, workers who used to work from 9 to 5, but the enterprises have asked them to work from 5 in the morning at night until lunchtime, and then other workers work from lunchtime until later. And then we have all kinds of unfortunate or even unlucky workers, people whose income has been furloughed. A lot of the time, people whose wages are already low because they are on temporary unemployment benefits. Their wages have become increasingly difficult to sustain and problematic from a financial point of view to sustain the household income. And then you have the very unlucky ones, people who have already been dismissed, and undoubtedly we will have more dismissals to come. So this is another topic of concern. How will we deal with unemployment and, for instance, youth unemployment, which in a lot of papers is as well a topic that has been stressed in the near future. Then, without much further ado, I would like to give the floor to our first speaker of today, Ms. Dalabayova, a member of the European Parliament. So I invite her to take the floor. If not, I assume it's the best solution is to have another speaker come first. I don't know if either Ms. Lynch or Ms. Party feels ready to engage. Ms. Lynch, perhaps?
I'm both happy and honored to go first. So thank you very much, Matthias, for giving me the opportunity. Not everybody knows this, but yesterday I bet Matthias that I'd be more than 5 minutes and less than 7. And I promised a bottle of wine if I didn't do it properly. So the challenge is on. It's 8 minutes past 2. Everybody agrees. So let's make it so that I can do within 5 minutes. We need a work-led recovery. That means that we need measures adopted at European level, and we need measures adopted at member state level. We need measures adopted at company level to make sure that work is to the forefront in our consideration of how do we get a fair recovery from this pandemic. I think in looking at the right to work, we need to go back to what does the right to work mean? So we need to go back to the basics. Let's look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and see what that fundamental grounding rights instrument, universally accepted, unchallenged in every decent democracy. What does that say about the right to work? And Article 23 says very clearly that everyone has the right to work, to the free choice of employment, to just and favourable conditions of employment, and to protection against unemployment. And I think what the important message of that is that you can't think about the right to work in abstraction from the conditions under which humans have to carry out that work. So the right to work is not an abstract concept. It's grounded in reality. It's grounded in the lived experience of the individual worker when they show up to do their work. It also encompasses some other really important concepts, such as just and favourable conditions of work. And just over an hour ago, the European Commission has launched a second stage consultation with the social partners, so both sides of industry, asking us, what do we see the role of the European Union should be in protecting fair minimum wages in the European Union? And that goes straight back to that basic human rights idea that not only should you be safe at work, but that the conditions, the pay that you're paid should be a pay that provides for a life of dignity, that values you, that lets you know that that your contribution is being properly valued, and also that you're getting your fair share of the profit that you're helping to create. And I think that's one of the big messages that workers have at the moment to the European Union, is that balance has got out of balance. That it used to be the case that you could collectively bargain for a fair share, and the proportion of the profits that went to working people were bigger. That's not an extraordinary thing for me to claim. There's research, from international research, to demonstrate that the proportion that used to go to working people was much bigger. So I think this initiative from the Commission to bring forward measures to guarantee living wages, just and favourable conditions of work, is important. The second piece that has to be high in our minds at the moment is the health and safety of workers. And just last night, I was looking at research given to me by my colleagues from America, and they asked low-paid workers, where do you see the balances between going back to work and being sure about your safety? And they also asked better paid workers the same question. And the lower paid workers were more afraid of returning to work. And the reason for that is because they know the experience that their health and safety is the last thing on the list. And whereas in the European Union, we're very clear, we will compete on lots of things, but not on the health and safety of workers. That there's a threshold of decency, and the threshold of decency is that you go home from work the same as you turned up there in the morning, that you shouldn't have to put your life on the line to be able to get your wage. So health and safety, a realistic understanding of that, not putting that in jeopardy, has to be part of the future of work. And finally, I think the other big learning that we have from this COVID crisis is that working from home is an option for a lot more workers than employers were willing to accept before the crisis. And I think that there's that arguments are now finished, that there are, if it's possible to work from home, you're now doing it. I think the discussion now is moving into, well, how do we make sure that working from home doesn't mean working 24/7 from home, that you're not now actually living at the office, that you're actually working from home. And I think that debate is beginning now. You're hearing a lot of talk about guaranteeing the right to disconnect, about making sure that the conditions for working from home are safe. Then finally, just on the going back to the human rights perspective, it talked about guarantee protection in unemployment. And I think that's the other big debate that we're going to be getting into. I know that the other colleague is going to talk about the all-important SURE initiative that guaranteed that workers would remain in employment by guaranteeing part of their wages. But the other important initiative that is about to be discussed at EU level is the minimum income, so a guarantee, and to address this crisis of insecurity that so many workers talk about the fear that they have that if they are to lose their job, that will mean losing their home, not being able to afford anything, that it would just mean complete financial ruin for them and their families. And so putting in a bottom rung of the ladder so that people know below this I won't go, below this the state will step in, that there will be guarantees to protect me and my family with an income. I think that is also something that the crisis has thrown up as being something that's really important for us all to talk about, to come up with a consensus in society about who pays what, to make sure that everybody has that guarantee, so we take the fear and insecurity out. So they're the main points I'd like to put into the debate. Thank you, Matthias.
Thank you very much for all those clarifications, and those are good points I think you raised. One question I would like to pose to you is, if you would have to prioritize one item and put one item on the table right now to address that you think this should get most of our attention right now, what would that be? What subject would that be?
I think the attention has to be about how does the recovery package that's being developed by the European Union promote industry, promote work, and promote the conditions of work. And that in the European Union, how do we compete? How do we make sure that we are faster than all of our competitors, that we're competing in the arenas where we want to be competing? And for me, the one measure that does that is including both sides of industry. So having strong social dialogue, so that you can identify what the problems are, that you can identify solutions, and you can deliver them. Not race to the bottom. Absolutely, there's no need for a race to the bottom. What's needed is a discussion among all the players who have part of this solution, bringing people together, doing it together, and by doing it together, we'll do a lot better in Europe. So for me, that's the most important thing, is including workers, their voice, their interest in the development and the delivery of solutions.
Okay, very well and very clear. Earlier on, we had a little bit of a technical glitch or an issue. I think Ms. Dalabayova is ready now to talk to us about her priorities and what she thinks is most important. So I would gladly give her the floor.
Thank you very much, Matthias, and good afternoon to everybody. Well, I was ready before well, but I think that we had just very good demonstration here. What is maybe the main struggling we are having in the last 2 months, which is too many digital platforms, too many applications, too many digital work. And I was just counting in these days that I have been installing 12 different applications in past 2 months. And I was almost happy that this is it. But today I had to install another one for some tomorrow conference. So just imagine how we are working on different platforms, on different digital supports. So first of all, thanks very much to European Liberal Forum for organizing such a great and interesting event. I'm very happy that I'm here because I think the attention of the future, on the future of work, on the new skills, on labor market, is in the center of the European Parliament. I spent my first mandate, last mandate, in employment committee, so this was like really in the center of my job. Now I am the coordinator in ITRE committee, which is the committee for the industry, and of course the same is here, because even in the center of the recovery, there is employment and there is future of work. We have heard it many times in these days, but I have to repeat it again. No doubt that the coronavirus pandemic will be seen as a huge milestone, and I am pretty sure many things will be different in the world of work after that. The COVID-19 pandemic has drastically changed the outlook for the European economy, and predictions for the near future are not very optimistic. I'm not going into the details of numbers of employment and of the recovery, but of course the pandemic hit the enterprises and business world very strongly. And many of them are risking of closing their business or face very serious financial consequences now. And now, how we look at it from the European Parliament point of view. Before the pandemic, usually when we had any debate about future of work, it meant for sure starting with the fourth industrial revolution, which is about to change completely the way we live and we work. I will not change this a bit today because it is still valid. The pandemic, which came unexpectedly, has shown us one more important thing, we are able to adapt to the new situation and do all the necessary steps very quickly. And I think this was very important demonstration for all of us. So I can see two main impacts of the industry transformation on the market, which will be important for the future. First of all, advanced technology, which has entered into areas where there's little or no need for it before. This means complete digital and artificial intelligence revolution, which will have great consequences on the economy and on our everyday life. There is no turning back from it. And the second point, more than a third of the skills that are important today will no longer be so a few years from now. But what we will need will be strong analytical capabilities, digital skills, critical thinking, creativity, and social skills. And all these will take precedence. And for me, very philosophical question is how the future skills will change after the coronavirus pandemic. We will need different skills? Because we are already struggling about imagining the future of skills. So what will happen now? That will be very interesting. Of course, even before the crisis, we heard very often that there is a lot of fear connected to the fourth industrial revolution because a lot of jobs can disappear and our labor market will be taken over by robots. But you know exactly that there are so many studies, so many numbers. We know for sure that in the 10, 20 years horizon, certain professions will stop to exist or there will be substantial changes in their processes. But at the end, we know that a lot of jobs which will disappear will be replaced and we will need new jobs, new skills. So this will be very interesting. And I'm happy to share with you some numbers. One recent study made by Institute for Politics and Society, which is a member organization of European Liberal Forum, in the Czech Republic showed that only 12% of Czech people are afraid that robots will steal their jobs. I was pleasantly surprised because the result was that half of interviewed people thought that robotization is positive and they see it as an opportunity to work less and do more creative activities instead. For me, that was very good news. So I personally doubt that digitization and robotization will reduce employment, but I can agree that some sectors will be more sensitive to change than others. And I'm not going into detail because maybe we can do into the details of sectors later on. And then I believe that many new professions which we don't know yet will be created. So that will be very interesting to start some studies. What will happen after the coronavirus crisis with the robotization, with the digitalization, with the new jobs for the future. But let's look now at new working conditions. Of course, we knew already before the crisis that the new labor market will definitely demand new working conditions. So even before, there was already rising demand for more flexible contracts, part-time jobs, possibilities of working from home, or some form of self-employment. And I'm sure that especially working from home is going to be a legacy of this lockdown. According to a new Eurofund study, nearly 4 in 10 people in the European Union began working from home as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's very interesting numbers for me. And it looks like countries, and you will know Matthias better than me, the countries where people were more keen to stay home and work from home were Netherlands, Luxembourg, Belgium, and Finland, which is interesting enough for me. On the other side of the spectrum, the country with lowest proportion, fewer than 1 people out of 5 of newly working from home is Romania. So as well, interesting geographical balance. And very interesting numbers I see now from my country. So I just share this with you and then I go to conclusion. The Czech Republic, before the crisis, had only 1% of employees working from home constantly, only 1%. But after the government measures, the share rose to 20%. Of course, we can be sure the number will fall down after the crisis. But accordingly to some predictions, it could stay at around 3–4% next year. So it will rise for sure. Other recent study among the employers in the Czech Republic has shown that during the quarantine, 9 in 10 companies let at least some of their employees work from home. 1/2 of all companies recommended the home office to all of their staff. And in 14% of enterprises, it was the company regulation. So 14% of companies let all people stay home mandatory. So that was very interesting for many companies. This was really the first time they used it, the first time they used experience of home working. And then, and I will be happy to hear what Sandra is going to say, because I see very interesting trend in Germany. The home office working possibility has changed the working environment in very interesting way, not only in time and digital sense of things, but as well in sense of the trust between the employees and employers, which is becoming stronger now. And the German media are talking about a new cultural revolution, because the Germans did not work from home that much as now before. So that's very interesting. And there are even 32% in Germany of people who would prefer to combine teleworking and office working. So I'm curious to hear how is the real situation on the ground. And then to conclude, what should we do as politicians? What should be our goal right now and our task right now? I am convinced we should support these trends with appropriate legislation. But regarding the COVID-19 crisis, there is one big challenge. One question I'm asking myself: how to change the rules, how to change the legislation and the rules of game when some countries maybe have made a 10-year step forward, but without being prepared for it. And just to mention one example, some countries lack the stable and secure internet connection, for example. And there are, of course, some other examples. But what should we really do as politicians? How should we interfere right now into the legislation and in the new rules of the game? So I will stop here, because I'm looking forward for a debate. I think that there will be a lot of questions, a lot of reactions. So I am very curious to hear them. But of course, my main philosophical question remains what the employers and the employees will expect now from policymakers after the corona pandemic crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that intervention. I think you raised a couple of good issues, things that I had also noticed when doing comparative research, that you have indeed big gaps between European or member states in the European Union that also, apart from the COVID pandemic, actually rely heavily on telework for purposes such as environmental friendly policies, as well as making enterprises more resilient. So I wanted to ask you, since telework is also something that has been well on the agenda of the European Union since a long time, since the framework agreement after 2000, to what extent do you think the European Parliament and other bodies at the European Union can actually engage to broaden, let's say, the national policies that might exist in the countries that use telework a lot, and actually have other countries like Romania, which you mentioned, adopt certain trends and policies that are obvious in countries such as Finland? Do you think the European Parliament can contribute to that effort, and how would they have to proceed?
We can contribute for sure, absolutely, and we should contribute. But of course, our role would be more of support, because you know that we cannot do legislation in this field because it's member states competent. But we should coordinate more between the member states, and we should maybe encourage member states to share best practice, which is something I think it's not happening so much as it could happen, because there are very good best practices, and we should just encourage member states to share them. And of course, we can prepare some, let's say, soft programs to give some incentives to the companies and to the member states to start with the teleworking. But I would say that in this case, the best practice will be the main issue. And if I may to mention, of course, European Parliament has been teleworking since 10th of March as well. So I think that the direct experience of different members of the European Parliament will be very useful one, because at the end you can test on yourself, what does it mean telework? What does it mean to find in working from home, the life-work balance? What does it mean to use the technologies? How we discovered where were the main gaps? We discover it in our everyday work. So I think it will be for sure positive experience for everybody. And we can build on something concrete we experienced by ourselves.
Okay, great. I think now we can move on to our final speaker for her intervention. So Ms. Party, amongst others, head of the European Affairs of the German Economic Institute, will give us a short talk about what her points are.
Well then, thank you very much. Thank you to ELF for inviting me. Thank you, Matthias. Also, thanks for the interesting and good gender balance in this panel for once. So yes, let's go into the lessons learned from our point of view. I think one of the main features is its very uneven effects from one sector to the other. It's very, very different how the virus and the crisis is impacting. In some areas, people really don't have an issue. In others, basically everything just went out the window. So it's also difficult then to find a blanket answer to this very uneven development in the economic sector. I guess when it comes to the lessons learned, I think on the sort of larger scale, it's really going to be about preparedness in the future, to be prepared for dealing with such a crisis, having the right institutions in place, having the right sort of systems in place, invest in time in the right sort of infrastructure, for instance, in digital. As we see in some countries, it has been easier for people to actually move to their homes and work from there. In other countries, you don't actually have the infrastructure that allows you to do video conferences, for instance, or access stuff from home. We need to establish a resilient economy, and we might also need to actually look into sort of establishing more redundancy systems, so that if one fails, one is not completely doomed. I think what we also learned from this whole situation is an interesting view and maybe a new view on essential workers. So which ones are the essential ones, and what does that mean in the future going forward from here with regards to their sort of role they play in the system. And I think another lesson learned is also communication and coordination. So it's really, really important to communicate to your employees the situation, the decision that you're making, why you're making them, if they are temporary, on what basis you are deciding. And coordinate, especially when it comes to the national level. It would be better to indeed coordinate before we close down borders again and we have workers stranded on the wrong side of the border, or different countries and governments introducing different rules and regulations that make it virtually impossible for people to actually go to their works and jobs. I think also for the time being, the dust has not settled yet. We don't really know yet the full impact of the situation. We've seen a lot of activity. We've seen the short-time work, the SURE instrument that was mentioned by Esther earlier, that allows companies to actually retain their workers and have financial support for them, and still having them on the payroll, even if the work is not there at the moment. The states are spending heavily. Foreclosures were stalled. We have rules in place that people might not be evicted from their homes. Companies restaurants, businesses of all kinds might get some tax breaks and receive support from the states. So there's a lot happening at the moment, which also costs a lot of money, which also is potentially covering the real extent of the impact of the virus at the moment. And we really don't see all too clearly yet on how this is going to impact our economies, not only today, but also in the future. We've been doing some analysis and research in our institute with regard to when do we see the economy to bounce back and to what level. We always come to at least it's going to take till the end of next year, and we might not fully bounce back. And who is going to bounce back in what way is also not entirely clear and not predictable, I would say, at the moment either. But it's not going to be over soon. It's not going to be over after the summer. It's not that everybody, if they can go on holidays, comes back and everything is normal. But it will take time. We have a lot of crashes, basically, in the demand side for products, for services, etc. So it will be very difficult, the recovery phase that we are going to enter, hopefully soon. Nevertheless, I would agree to what has been said earlier by both Esther and Martina in terms of what can we expect for the future of work. It's definitely going to be more digital, at least here in Europe. It did start being more flexible already, and the flexibility has increased now even more. I think also we're going to see a bit of counter sort of acting trends in a way. In one way, we're going to be less global. We might actually move production back to Europe. People might be more focused on local, buying local, traveling local, etc. So value chains might be reshored, onshored again. On the other hand, as everything is digital now, we could also be actually more global because we don't actually have to travel everywhere again. We can actually assess machines now from our home and across the globe. So there is going to be trends going probably in both directions. I think in Germany, as has been mentioned before, when it comes to the use of home office, that was indeed very widely used wherever it was possible, I must say. I mean, many activities you just cannot move to the home. If you're a carpenter, you can virtually sort of design a desk, but it's not going to help your customer. But many companies and businesses try to adapt, introduce shift systems to allow workers to come and actually work insofar as there was actually still demand. And I think this is going to be something that we are going to have to deal with in the coming months, that it's no longer about supply, it's no longer about value chains and products not coming to Europe from China and elsewhere, but it's about demand. It's yeah, how many times will we go to the hairdressers? We've all been there once, I guess, since the lockdown ended, but we are not going to go twice. We're not going to eat all the meals that we haven't eaten in the restaurants, etc. So the demand is going to pose a problem. It's also another area that is going to be problematic is for the group of people that is trying to actually enter the job market now. They are in a very difficult situation. They cannot really start their work life the way it was planned. We also see statistics on contracts that have either been delayed or cancelled altogether. So the right to work, yes, but it depends on demand, and it depends on whether there is actually going to be the possibility for people to go back to work and to start in their fields of expertise again. They might change, there might be different requirements now. I was looking at the numbers that we were crunching with regard to the home office and in how far companies are actually using it. It seems that only about 15% of companies are actually happy with the way it works. A lot of the companies do experience some difficulties and don't actually think they will permanently do their business model online now. It depends a bit on what is necessary for getting back to the normal way or to the pre-crisis way of working. For some, it's feasible to do all the necessary disinfections. It's feasible to provide their workers with the necessary protective equipment, etc. For others, it's not that easy, and they might have a problem in restarting after the lockdown now ends. So again, I think I come back to my first point. It's a very uneven effect on the different sectors, and we will not have a blanket answer to everything. We will really have to go sector by sector, and that's not going to make it any easier, neither for the politicians nor for the companies.
Okay, great. I think I would agree with this. I mean, especially as far as the diverse impact on different workers and sectors and industries. Before asking a question, a follow-up question, I would like to clarify to all the participants that they are very welcome to ask questions. We've had at least one question so far, but please feel free to ask us many more. In terms of the question I had, I think you are very familiar with policies in general and follow up on national policies as they develop. So I would like to ask if there's like any policy that you've seen that you found particularly interesting and worth exploring if they can be applied elsewhere in another country, or a policy which you have thought to be completely in the wrong direction. So one that you would actually like to talk about in the sense that you don't think this will be the solution.
The one that I find is has been already successfully exported from Germany is the one on short-term work. So we did have the short-time work already in the previous crisis, and that went well, and that has apparently also convinced European decision makers. So we have the SURE instrument, and I think that's a very good one. We keep hearing this when we talk to companies. This is number one when it comes to what is the instrument that has helped you most so far in the crisis. Number two is tax breaks and these kind of things, but yeah, might be expected from companies as well that they try and use possibilities here as well. Another one that I don't necessarily find a very good approach is the scrappage scheme that is currently discussed in Germany again for the cars. So to actually have another support program in place for non-specified kinds of cars, I find this is not necessarily something that we need to export to other countries. We might be a bit more targeted if we indeed want to introduce a scrappage scheme. It should support the whole transition to a more ecologic and sustainable economy.
Okay, great. First, I would like to ask if any of the two first speakers have heard anything that they would like to pick up on. If not, then I propose to take the first question. Okay, so let's take a look. So Victor Tomis has asked us if a company should they offer their employees the opportunity to work from home for the rest of their lives, like Twitter did, for example. So the possibility to work from home in the long run, will this be something that will become a structural part, I guess, of people's work-life balance?
If I may come
yeah, sure.
into this, and then I think, well, it's as an option. It should be possible for employees to actually, if it's feasible with the kind of work they do, to actually do it from home. However, I've seen also some research that we did that employees say that they don't necessarily like this so much. Some of them are actually afraid that they miss out on some work developments. So when they're not in the office, when they're not in the headquarters, that they are not actually as well informed about things and opportunities going on, so that people actually do want to spend time in the headquarters, in the office. So I would say as an option, potentially yes, but there also needs to be some kind of relationship between the employee and the employer. So if I am as a sort of somebody who's leading a team, I would like to see my team members every once in a while, also in person, to actually have a bit of a discussion on how they are doing, etc. So to just do everything remotely, I would not find this such a great solution. The German law at the moment doesn't actually give you a right to do home office work, so you cannot actually argue that you have to have or that you must work from home. And at the moment, I think it's good to have the opportunity, but I don't would make it sort of a must.
Martina, if you wanted to intervene, go ahead.
Yes, yes, thank you. Well, I think that we have to put it in this way. Like, one thing is that, of course, companies can do it, can offer this opportunity to their employees. It depends on the kind of job they are doing, of a kind of environment they are working. And I think it's a really question of the trust and of the balance between work and like work-life balance. Because it can look at the first side that it's easier to have better work-life balance working from home. But I must say that I'm not so convinced after all the stories I heard in the last 2 months. It's even more difficult maybe sometimes to keep the balance. Because when you are home, everybody thinks that you are always available. You are available in every moment. Everybody wants to put conferences at every time. And on the other side, you have some other issues, of course, to do at home. So I think that the big question will be the balance, life-work balance. And the second issue will be the trust between employees and employers. I am convinced that a lot of employers realized in these 2 months that they can trust their employees even if they work from home. And this will give them enough flexibility to offer remote working as well, which is something that maybe they didn't want to do before. So it will be more than question of any legislation, any rules. It will be more the question of individual setting between the employer and employee. So this is how I see it in this moment. And I am speaking for myself as well, because member of the European Parliament is employer as well. And I know that it's very delicate that everybody is reacting in different way on home office. So you have to be very reasonable and very flexible in this.
Yes, I think that makes a lot of sense. Esther, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I just want to reinforce a complete agreement with the other two speakers. The research shows from Ireland that they asked, have you started telework since COVID? And if you have, do you want to continue it after? And men wanted to continue it more than women. And I think that what that demonstrates is the reinforcement of the unfair burden of trying to homeschool the kids, take care of the house, respond to everything that's going in the house, and meet your targets. You know, not so simple or easy as well. So for sure, I agree with the speakers. It needs to be choice. It needs to be based on trust. You need time sovereignty, and all importantly, if you think you can pay people less because of where they live, so if you live in a city, you forget it, right? So you know, we're always, you know, wary of that type of thing. I also think employers who've done it very well create, we say, coffee rooms. So we did that, you know. So we have a coffee room. We try to recreate the social environment that you would get in the workplace. But just as a personal thing, if I had a personal friend who came and said to me, I'm thinking of teleworking forevermore, I'd say that's unwise if you want promotion, because people promote people they spend time with and who they, you know, have an opportunity to develop trustful relationships with. And I'm not quite sure that you get the same trustful relationship in this environment. So for sure, don't need to be in the office all day, every day. Don't need to be that. But to say you're never going to be there, I mean, that would take, it would say, 5 years to look at, you know, what the consequences were for promotion. But my instinct would be that you need to spend some time with the people who make promotion decisions.
Yes, I think I would completely agree with this. As far as I know, not legal research, but other research shows that part-time telework is best both for the employee in general as well as the employer, more so than actual full-time telework. So I think there's a lot of research already on these kind of issues that might now actually see the daylight, in part because of how pertinent it is right now. We have a bunch of other questions by now. One question in particular is really on the European level, is really about the European level. So I will address this one first now that we have the 3 speakers lined up still. So Adam Barta has asked about the advantages of European labor regulation harmonization. And there's a clarification, namely that member states have vastly different productivity rates, can afford furlough schemes to very different levels, and welfare safety nets are equally diverse. So what is the advantage of aiming to resolve this issue on an EU level compared to a national or regional one? Don't know if anyone straight away has an answer to this question.
It's probably Sandra with the Shore scheme first. Do you want to?
I don't really have a good overview, I must say, of the different labor regulation harmonization issues and the levels of productivity. Yeah, I guess indeed it's complicated when you do have very different levels of productivity, and that indeed the impact is very different on the different countries. But I guess the possibility to actually find some funding and find some support on the European level to actually help everyone to be a bit more sort of convergent on this would be a beneficial approach. But beyond that, I haven't really looked at the numbers too much at the moment.
So what I'd say then is that the SURE initiative is an EU-wide response to make sure that companies can put people, so that member states have enough resources to make sure that companies can put people on short-time work. And the reason that's important is because we need the whole European economy able to restart as quickly as possible. I mean, it won't be as simple as putting up a switch, but we need internal demand. Like this idea when you're in a global recession that you don't need internal demand is foolish. So we need a lot of internal demand in the EU. The other big mistake is to think that the difference in wages is as associated to productivity as I was saying earlier. It used to be the case that according to productivity, wages kept track with productivity. That ended 20 years ago. So we've seen this constant divergence between productivity, the level of productivity of workers and their wages. And importantly, the biggest myth is that workers in the East are paid less because they're less productive. Absolutely wrong. Workers in the East are actually more productive. They're paid less. Like when you take into account levels of productivity and the cost of living, the wage gap gets even bigger. So a lot of the say assumptions around productivity and what companies can afford and what member states can afford, the textbooks aren't being kept up to date. The economic thinking isn't, based on the reality. And we have an awful lot of research that if you go to the ETUC webpage outlining all this is scientific research on actual wages and actual productivity and the wage gap east-west.
Okay. Martina, who needs to go to a meeting soon?
I will try to be very brief. First of all, I must say, listening to the question, I am not in favor of the harmonization at the European level. I think that there is a reason why we have 27 now labor markets. We have different labor systems. We have differentiation of wages in different member states because of different history, because of different level of wages, because of different comparative advantages. So I'm not in favor. Of course, there are some situations where we need to be European. Like, first of all, in this situation, we need to have a common answer. but we can do this through the coordination between different member states and through sharing the best practices, as I mentioned already before. Then, of course, we have very specific situation of cross-border workers. There are very specific situations between different countries. And this is something that we are going to address in the European Parliament as well. Just for your information, Renew Group is working right now on a paper dedicated to cross-border workers. And I think this is something we are going to work together with the European Liberal Forum as well, because it's very liberal approach to the cross-border workers. And we had to solve this with some rules when we were working in last years on posting of workers, on mobility package, because there you have European situation of the worker. But I am not as a base in favor to have labor regulation harmonized at European level. I think that this should stay in the competencies of different member states. Thank you.
I mean, if I could just disagree a little bit, because I think that when you have a single market, you need to have a single set of rules. And the single set of rules that we have in terms of labor regulation at the moment is it sets, if you like what member states will compete on. And you say below this, there won't be competition. And all member states are involved in establishing what the EU level rules are. It's not that the EU comes up with its own set of rules. All member states say, yes, this is the thing on which below which we won't compete. And I think that a European Union based on a wild west of employment regulations isn't actually going to be a great outcome that some people make it out to be. So I'd recommend, I mean, I know probably not so many people show up here and say that, but I'd recommend to rethink a strategy based more on what are the type of regulations that give us competitive advantage, help us move faster, come up with better solutions, rather than saying none.
Martina, I don't know if you have something
but this
as well.
This is why I mentioned some concrete cases that we were working on that, like posting workers, mobility package, cross-border workers. So I am aware of that, that in some cases we absolutely need the regulation. But like as the principle, I am against the common regulation. We cannot have one single labor code for the whole Europe. This is, for me, in this moment, impossible.
Okay, great. I don't know if Martina still has some time for us. If so, then I think we have a question that is like straight up her alley. You discussed earlier about the skills that we might need in the future. So someone asks, what skills will be important in the future? What should we focus on if we want to get a job in the future?
Well, if I may take this one and then I will go for the meeting, I will be already a little bit by, I think thank you so much.
I mean,
it's very important. Well, very good questions. And as I said before, I will be very much curious if we will change something on the new skills agenda, how it was presented by the European Commission and how it was then adopted by the European Parliament, because we worked on new skills agenda last 3 years. And I want to see if something will change after this 2 months. Well, me personally, I would for sure ask to have better digital skills for not only for myself, but for 80% of people I saw on different video conferences and video meetings. We should all improve our digital skills. But this is just a joke. Of course, when we were talking about skills for the future, we talked more about the soft skills, like flexibility, ability to adapt during our career, ability to learn, ability to teach others. Lifelong learning will be absolutely crucial. Interdisciplinary thinking, critical thinking, and of course language skills and foreign experience. What I always put as a big priority, because I was personally a reporter on the new skills agenda in the Parliament, I did put as a priority entrepreneurial skills, which doesn't mean that everyone needs to start their own business, which means the set of skills which are real mindset of everybody. Whatever you are going to do in your life, you need to have entrepreneurial mindset. You can be teacher, you can be doctor, you can be politician. You will always see the difference if somebody has entrepreneurial mind. So I think these are the skills of the future. We call them soft. but they are the hardest to get, I would say.
Sounds accurate. I would invite you. First of all, I would like to thank you for participating to this debate. So, I mean, we understand if you have other meetings to go to. The other speakers.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Matthias, for moderating. Thank you, Sandra and Esther. It was a pleasure to be with you. I hope that we will repeat this soon. And thanks to European Liberal Forum. And I'm sorry, I'm running to other meeting. Running not, I'm just switching.
Stay safe, no worries.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye. So for the remaining speakers, I don't know if you have, you could either answer this question in particular, or if there are any other last remarks you would like to make.
Your colleague is saying that we have to finish. So I also want to say thanks very much, and to see like the ETUC as somebody to come and talk to, you know, in particular, we're very anxious to get social dialogue. So discussions directly between ourselves and with business, and to identify like what, you know, where can we both agree, and we just finished off an agreement on digitalization with the employers, which addresses exactly that question. How can both sides work together to ensure that people know the skills they need, can get the skills they need, and can make sure that they are as invested in the business doing well, and that is properly rewarded and respected. I'll just finish off giving my own example. So here I am, a woman in my late 50s, trained as a lawyer. So if I was to lose my job, so you're looking at the jobs that artificial intelligence is going to replace, and it's us. We're always in the top 10, wherever you look at, yeah. And I think that is the fundamental question facing all of us, both representatives of working people, enterprise, states, the EU is what, like, how do I make sure that I can reskill? Like what, you know, how do I pay my mortgage when I'm doing that? You know, and then, you know, how quickly can I do that? Because if we're going to be working into our 60s, much further than I ever expected to when I started working, this idea of a third career, a third chance career, you know, has to be something that we start thinking a lot more about. And maybe it's about providing, like, you know, taking time off, and having a guarantee to be able to do that, so that we say you work 10 years, you study, you work 10 years, you study, you work 10 years, you study, and you know how we make sure people have access to the right training and that they can afford to take up those options is absolutely critical discussion that we all need to have. But thanks again for inviting us.
Yes, exactly, it is. Sandra, do you have any last words you would like to share?
No, I'm good. I just want to also thank you very much. And personally, I like actually being in the office. I'm not that good working from home. I like the flexibility, I must say. So this is positive. I also like the fact that we don't need to commute and spend time in cars. So that's certainly a positive effect. However, I think we are on the privileged side. We do have jobs that we can do from home. We are not the ones being laid off or losing jobs or having precarious jobs to begin with. So we need to figure out how we can help those that are in a more sort of difficult situation. And I agree when it comes to the social dialogue, that's definitely a way to go.
Daniel, I see you have joined. Do you also agree that we have a lot to learn from each other?
Oh, absolutely. And I think this is only the first step. For instance, Esther, I would love to continue the debate with you. I think especially liberals and trade unions, they should talk more, they should argue a lot more with each other, and they should listen a lot more to each other. And so this is not an olive branch, I think, but a very warm welcome that we maybe do more together, discuss more together, because especially in times of these, I think it's very important to listen to each other's arguments, and learn from each other indeed. And just to have my very short closing remarks, I enjoyed this a lot. Sandra, Esther, together with the two of you, but also with Martina, who had to leave already. But what I can say is that we should and we have to continue this dialogue, and we will, especially I think in person. That would be lovely. We have a format that is dedicated for something like that. Where we have a debate format that followed the Oxford Union debate style, and I would love to continue this, especially on the issue of harmonization and the question of subsidiarity in Europe, and whether or not a more harmonized labor market regulation throughout Europe actually makes sense or would contradict the principle of subsidiarity on which Europe and a lot of the liberal values are built on, and also how we measure productivity. Is it the GDP hours for the GDP contribution, which of course Romania is doing very well, but the Romanian GDP as such is not that great comparing to that of Germany. So is that an accurate measure, having then Romania on top and Germany at the bottom? But these are things that we have to discuss. But a couple of things I think that we can agree on. That is something that Martina mentioned in the end, and that was the entrepreneurial spirit. That is crucial, I think, for the survival in the labor market in the future. And that is true whether you are learning a craft, which I think is ways underrated in Europe, or a trade, but also when it comes to working in a factory, but also working in home. And I think there we have to take two more or less liberal philosophers in mind. And one is Schumpeter, who's talking about creative destruction. They're saying there are things that arise anew, and new opportunities arise from the collapse of the old things. But if we see the old labor market or the old principles collapsing now, how do we deal with that? And that is something that we can only answer with this entrepreneurial spirit, which goes in the direction of Immanuel Kant, who is talking about enlightenment and making use of your own mind. And if we do not learn to make use of our own minds, then we will not be able to compete in the labor market of the future. But this has to be encouraged, this has to be taught. And last but not least, what I want to say is, one thing that has been overlooked in the past and something that Sandra hinted to is trust. That there seems to be a lot more trust between the employers and the employees than we have given ourselves credit for in the past. And I think this is also the main reason why this teleworking has been working now in the last couple of months. And I think that is something that we should emphasize a little bit more in the future. One thing I would like to emphasize at the end is that this has been the 9th edition of Liberties in Lockdown. Next week will be the 10th and maybe even last edition, where we will talk about culture and what this crisis has meant for culture, personal expression, but also for all the people who are employed in the cultural sphere. So next week we are back at the old time at 9:30 on Wednesday. Please tune in again, tell your friends, tell your family, and please welcome us again in your living rooms, your studies, maybe on the grass patch that you're sitting on right now, or even back in your office. Thank you very much, Esther, Sandra, Matthias, and Martina, and thank you all much for joining us today. Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.